So I would like to go ahead and get us started today. Thank you very much to all of our audience members for being with us today. Um, we're very excited to have you. And this webinar today is part of a series, as you've seen from the announcements. The series began on February 1st. We had our first webinar that focused on snow leopards as an umbrella species in Himalayan and other high mountain ecosystems that is important to all other species and that is heavily impacted by the linear infrastructure development that is growing in the region. So we were looking at how that threat affects snow leopards and perhaps thinking about some solutions. But with regard to solutions, there were a lot of questions from audience members about how exactly linear infrastructure can be created while allowing for the needs of big cats to continue to be met. So we decided it would be important to have another webinar providing some of those examples and really digging into that question. So today we have a couple of very important speakers who are going to provide some excellent examples from India. So my name is Tremaine Gregory, and I'm very excited to have you all here with us today. And now I would like to introduce Mary Melnick, who will be providing some introductory remarks. Mary is the Environmental Security and Resilience Division Chief at USAID's Asia Bureau. Thank you so much for being with us today, Mary. And please, I would like to pass the microphone to you for some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tremi. On behalf of USAID, WWF, and the Center for Large Landscape Conservation, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar and the second in the series that Tremi mentioned. I especially am quite happy to recognize our chief guest, Dr. S.P. Yadav, who is the Interim Head Director General of the International Big Cat Alliance, and Mr. Pankaj Kumar Maurya, who is the project director for the National Highway Institute, Authority of India, excuse me. So why are we in this meeting? Immediately, we're here to demonstrate, as Tremi said, that you can have both infrastructure development and biodiversity at the same time, and we're going to learn how. But another goal and reason why we're here is to begin to bring together the conservation and infrastructure communities. So we have our top expert on conservation, Dr. Yadav, as well as someone from the Highways Authority. So we would like to also encourage everyone to begin talking together as well and forming alliances moving forward. Why big cats? Well, big cats, most of us know, are the top predators. They're the apex species. And if we focus on them as ambassadors, we have the opportunity to save all of the species and animals that live within their habitats, and we begin to protect ecosystems. I also would like to take advantage of this time to remind everyone that healthy ecosystems are vital in addressing the climate crisis. Not only do they sequester carbon, but they also provide resilience to climate change. And big cats are the threats of life on the planet through biodiversity. So through today's webinar, you're going to hear what's possible. And we encourage all of you to consider these options and to begin partnering amongst the different communities, whether it be conservation or infrastructure, and work within your own sectors. For example, with the Conference of Biodiversity, consider how wildlife-friendly infrastructure can be a part of national biodiversity strategic action plans. If you're working in the infrastructure sector, if you're an engineer, please consider how you can incorporate these measures that we're going to hear today within your own work as well. So with that, I'd like to hand back over to Tremi, and I'd also like to encourage all of you to join us, WWF, USAID, of course, and the Center for Large Landscape Conservation, to make wildlife-friendly infrastructure the norm rather than the exception. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for those remarks. Indeed, big cats, the protection of big cats contributes to the protection of entire ecosystems, and also, of course, the protection of our species, because we depend on all the services that those ecosystems provide. So now I would like to pass the microphone to Kate Newman. Kate is the Vice President of Sustainable Infrastructure and Public Sector Initiatives at the World Wildlife Fund in the United States. Thank you very much, Kate, for being with us today.
Thanks, Tremi. Thanks so much. And I'm very excited to be the moderator of this really important event today. And also I represent the ALIGN project that Mary mentioned, the Asia's Linear Infrastructure Safeguarding Nature Project. This is funded by USAID and has been helping Asia address strengthening of safeguards and implementation of safeguards, primarily through some focal countries, Nepal, India, and Mongolia. And here today, we're looking at a specific angle on this challenge of how linear infrastructure is affecting the landscapes of Asia, the nature, the biodiversity, and the resilience to climate change. Big cats, as Mary was saying, are an umbrella species. They affect a lot of other species in their habitat, and so play a vital role in indicating how healthy and how stable the ecosystems are. And the fact that linear infrastructure runs through these landscapes and affects lots of the habitat that these species rely on makes addressing the safeguards of the development of this infrastructure absolutely vital for the sustainability of the communities in this region and the biodiversity and nature as the region moves forward. So the ALIGN project is working with governments, academic institutions, civil society to strengthen these safeguards and build capacity for the implementation, which we're going to look at today in our discussion. So this series is moving forward with, we started with snow leopards, now we're moving on to, in this particular case, tigers in India mostly, but we're addressing the real world examples of how safeguards are designed, how they're implemented, and how they're achieving sustainable infrastructure development that protects the natural habitats and avoids the direct threats that are so critical for sustaining these populations of vital species and supporting the communities that live in and around these habitats. So today we'll be learning about the extraordinary advances India is making as an example to the world, both in developing the safeguards, putting them into law, and then implementing them on the ground. So we'll have both the theory and the idea behind how they develop these safeguards, and then we're going to examine how that actually is working in Dehradun on the ground in India. So I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing our chief guest today, Dr. S.P. Yadav. He's the interim head and director general of the International Big Cat Alliance, and he's had a long and distinguished career in conservation and is absolutely renowned for his expertise on the magnificent tiger. Please find his bio in the chat, and I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Yadav. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Kate Newman. May I have my presentation, please? So at the outset, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to organizers for organizing this very, very relevant webinar on a very relevant topic, which is very, very important to the developing countries like India, Nepal. If you see the South Asia, particularly India, Nepal, Bangladesh, we have more than 80% global population of tigers. India alone is the largest tiger-rich country in the world, having more than 70% wild tigers in the wild. Next, please. First time in the history in 2010, all tiger-rich countries, they gathered in St. Petersburg, and all country heads were there, and they gathered there for the cause of tiger conservation, because at that time the tiger numbers were declining rapidly at the global level. And all countries, they pledged themselves that they will double the tiger number by 2022 in the form of St. Petersburg Declaration on Tiger Conservation. After that, almost a decade has passed, and some countries like India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Russia, they have shown that tiger numbers are increasing. But in all other countries, the tiger numbers are either static or declining. And 3 countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos PDR, they lost all their tigers. The poaching was the main reason for this loss of tigers in these countries, and also the habitat loss and habitat destruction because of linear infrastructure and development and other industrial growth. Next, please. India has achieved phenomenal success in tiger conservation. The tiger population is growing at an annual rate of almost 6.1% annually. And the population is doing very well in most parts of the countries. But it is not because that only the conservation efforts are there. India has a very good law putting a lot of resources in tiger conservation. When the Project Tiger started in 1973, there were only 9 tiger reserves, but now we have 55 tiger reserves encompassing approximately 80,000 square kilometers of tiger habitat. Next, please. There are challenges in India, like habitat fragmentation, source sink dynamics. The tiger, the litter, the cubs, when they're born, they're normally 2 to 4 in numbers with each female, and they remain with the mother with 2 to 3 years approximately. They learn hunting skills and all from the mother. And when they grow up, the sub-adults and adults, they move to other areas in order to establish their own territory. We call it dispersal. And the tigers, they have innate quality, the ability to disperse themselves. The tigers are territorial animals. They need to establish their own territory. And when the sub-adults or adults, they grow up, they need to establish their own territory. In search of territory, they move from their natal areas to other areas. Therefore, they need connectivity. Tigers cannot survive in the islands of protected areas. You must be aware that the Sariska Tiger Reserve in India, it lost all its tiger in 2005. And Sariska was one isolated island of protected area. If it could have a corridor connectivity with other source areas, the situation would have been different. Therefore, this corridor connectivity is very, very important. And the next point which I would like to emphasize that ecological, unsustainable land uses in tiger landscape, and that is leading to loss of connectivity. When I say that unsustainable land uses, that means linear infrastructure, that includes linear infrastructure, the mining, the dams, and all developmental activities. And when this linear infrastructure, they bifurcate the corridors or they disturb these corridors, then the dispersal of tigers, that is adversely affected. And that leads to human-tiger conflicts in human-dominated landscapes. And you will not be surprised to know that in India, the human-tiger conflict is again a serious issue because tiger numbers are increasing and their dispersal and entry into human-dominated landscape is increasing, and approximately 50 to 100 people every year, they die because of tiger attacks. These infrastructures are really required. We cannot stop that because we are a developing country and we need economic development, we need infrastructure, we need growth, we need employment. We have to find a balance. In 2010 declaration of St. Petersburg, it talked about fostering a smart green infrastructure. And what are smart green infrastructures? Basically, they are the mitigation measures which the countries can adopt, which will allow the permeability of moving animals like tigers. Next, please. If you see this triangle, the pyramid structure, left side is increasing cost and right side is decreasing ease of implementation. This indicates that when habitat is enough, prey is enough, but there are no tigers, it requires huge cost and it is very difficult to manage it. The next if habitat is there, prey is there, if tigers are less in number, that can be managed. If the habitat is there, there is no prey, no tiger, it is very difficult to bring back tigers. And similarly, we cannot create a tiger reserve like Kanha Tiger Reserve. Whatever amount we invest, we cannot create a Kanha Tiger Reserve or Corbett Tiger Reserve. So therefore, it is very, very important that at the very beginning level, when the tiger population is low, we get notice of it and we go through, we analyze, we research, we find out the causes of declining population of tiger and take measures. Otherwise, we cannot create tiger reserves like Kanha, Corbett, or Ranthambore. Next, please. Now, what are the smart green infrastructures or what are the mitigation measures? In fact, the best mitigation measure is avoidance. If we can avoid the corridor or protected area for construction of linear infrastructure or any other infrastructure, that is the best mitigation measures. After that, the alternates of it, like suppose a road is passing through corridor, can we avoid that? Or can we find out an alternate alignment which will minimize the loss or which will less adversely affect the movement of animals? Then the next principle comes, this reduce the impact, how the impact of infrastructure, particularly linear infrastructure, can be reduced so that the animals, they will have the less impact or lesser impact on construction of this kind of infrastructure. And if it is not possible, the next will be restore. If there is any possibility of habitat improvement, providing safe passage to animals, then we need to restore the habitat, restore the connectivity. We can, there are mitigation measures which can very well do this. The last option comes remedy or compensate. And that should be the least preferred option. There are number of technologies available. In 2010, we never thought that when this declaration came for adoption of a smart green infrastructure, we never thought that India would be able to implement all these mitigation measures so fast. But now, if we see, we'll be seeing in the presentation of Mr. Maurya, a lot of mitigation measures have been taken up successfully in India. Now they're part of planning itself. Next, please. There are certain principles of green infrastructure like sensitive planning and design to protect wildlife interest. Permeability is the key, grounded in science and land use theory and practice, pre-identifies ecologically significant lands and suitable development areas, designed to provide favor for growth, planned and protected before development. This is extremely important. Retrofitting measures, once a road is constructed or railway line is laid, it is very difficult to adopt the retrofitting measures that will involve huge cost as well as it will be very difficult to implement. The mitigation measures have to be adopted at the very planning level itself, at the very beginning. Scientifically, there is a need to identify the important corridors, the niche areas, which are important from a wildlife point of view or tiger's movement point of view. And then mitigation measures should be part of, they must be part of the planning itself. And the DPR, it should be part of the DPR, it should be the part of budget allocation itself. Because once these structures are constructed, it becomes very, very difficult to have some additional budget or support from government or any donor agency. Next, please. this cartoon, I wanted to show that tiger, there are very frequent incidents of tiger entering into human dominated landscapes. And once the tiger enters into such areas, there is hue and cry and people blame the wildlife or tigers. So this cartoon says, why so frequent visits to city area? The tiger says, why not? Just look at this map. This was my ancestors' place. So this is happening. This is reality. Next, please. Next slide, please. This slide shows the central Indian landscape, tiger landscape of Madhya Pradesh. And here you can see Chanakmar Tiger Reserve, the Kanha Tiger Reserve, then Page Tiger Reserve, Satpura Tiger Reserve, and then Melghat Tiger Reserve. And the bottom below is Tadoba Tiger Reserves. And these are with the white line there. It shows that they are very well connected with tigers. There are genetic evidences through scat analysis that tigers, they keep on moving in these tiger reserves. Next, please. If we superimpose with major road network, this is the scenario. The corridors are cut by these roads. We need roads as well, but this is the scenario. Next, please. And this is how the tigers, they keep on moving from one source areas to another areas. And they very frequently, they use their all functional corridors, and this and all in these roads, we have adopted the mitigation measures. Next, please. Next, please. So how these are being, how the mitigation measures are being implemented or adopted in India. We have the Government of India with the help of National Tiger Conservation Authority and the Wildlife Institute of India. We have come out with eco-friendly mitigation measures. And these mitigation measures, they provide provisions, they provide design or for all linear infrastructure, particularly for roads, rails, the underpasses and dimensions of overpasses. Like the tigers, they require at least 4-meter clearance for underpasses or overpasses. Similarly for elephants and all, these linear infrastructure guidelines, they are available on the website of Wildlife Institute of India as well as National Tiger Conservation Authority. And whenever any linear infrastructure construction which passes through project passes through protected area or the corridor, they have to seek permission, the prior approval from the National Board of Wildlife. And while according approval by the National Board of Wildlife, certain conditions for mitigation are provided, and then only the projects get approved under the wildlife clearance. And also the forest land is involved. There are laws under which the user agency, the project proponent, they have to approach to the relevant authorities to get the approvals. And with these approvals, the linear infrastructure, they are constructed or executed, projects are executed on the ground. Next, please. This is one example. This is the corridor between Kanha Tiger Reserve and Page Tiger Reserve. This is NH, National Highway number 44. And when the first time the proposal of road construction came before the NTCA, National Tiger Conservation Authority, there was a lot of debate whether such kind of widening of road can be allowed in the corridor, which is very, very important for survival of tigers. And there was public interest litigation in the court of law. Ultimately, the Supreme Court allowed construction of this overpass or elevated road with certain mitigation measures which were prescribed by National Tiger Conservation Authority. It took very many years to settle this issue. But finally, when this elevated road was constructed, we have seen that animals, tigers, and all other animals are very frequently using this route. And this has been a quite successful model. And this has boosted our morale and given a successful case study for implementing this kind of elevated road in other parts of the country. Next, please. I would like to quote Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. We do not believe in conflict between ecology and economy, but give equal importance to coexistence of both. And this was the quote given by him when we were celebrating 50 years of Project Tiger in 23 April. Next, please. I will conclude my remarks by saying that why India has been successful in implementing these mitigation measures, because these corridors, the definition of corridor, the protected area, they have been incorporated in our national legislature, that is Wildlife Protection Act. Corridors have been defined. Any activity, any development activity cannot disturb the corridor. If any project is to be implemented in that, they have to seek mandatory approval, the prior approval from the National Board of Wildlife. And when such project proposals are submitted to the National Board of Wildlife, they are referred to the National Tiger Conservation Authority, which analyzes, which examines it. And if need be, they refer it back to the Wildlife Institute of India. And with all scientific background, mitigation measures are prescribed in these projects proposals, and then it is again put before it is submitted to the National Board of Wildlife, which is chaired by Honorable Union Minister and experts from the field. And then a decision is taken whether to allow this kind of project or not. If it is allowed, it is allowed with all standard mitigation measures, and there is a monitoring mechanism as well. It's not only that approval is given and the project proponent is just executing it. There is a monitoring mechanism involved which ensures that these mitigation measures are implemented on the ground. With these words, I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yadav. This is a very comprehensive and informative view of these complex challenges facing tigers and their habitat today, especially in India. And I just wanted to applaud your mention of the Smart Green Infrastructure Principles, which was one of the first documents that inspired me to get deeply involved in the infrastructure challenge that we're facing right now. And also the other document you mentioned, I use all the time, the Wildlife Institute of India's Eco-Friendly Measures to Mitigate Wildlife Impacts by Infrastructure. This is actually, those two documents are ones that we use around the world to help people understand what can be done. And then I very much appreciated you starting with the principles of the mitigation hierarchy and highlighting the most important one, which is avoidance. Of course, it's the most challenging of all as populations grow and people need to make a living. The space for new infrastructure is becoming more and more difficult to find. But if you can avoid those critical habitats and maintain the corridors for tigers that you described, there is a lot of hope for the future for our wildlife. But I also wanted to conclude these slight remarks with the focus that you've had on planning and budgeting early, and then embedding these principles into law and policy. This is an extraordinary advance that India has taken, and we're all very much inspired by it. So now we'll turn to how that plays out on the ground with Mr. Pankaj Kumar Moyer, who is the project director of the National Highway Authority of India in Dehradun, where I visited last year and saw, I think, some of the slides that you'll be showing. It was an extraordinary experience. So Mr. Kumar Moyer will help us visualize how these safeguards for big cats and their species they coexist with are taking place on the ground. So thank you for joining us, and please take the floor.
Namaste, good evening all the participants. I'm very much thankful to the organizer and WWF for giving me this opportunity to present the wildlife-friendly measures being carried out in the highway sector in India. As on date, a number of mitigation structures in the form of wildlife-friendly measures have been implemented in different infrastructure projects in India. I'm talking especially about the highway sector. So in today's presentation, we'll be covering a successfully implemented case study. Kindly share the presentation. We'll be covering a successfully implemented case study. It's a 12-kilometer long elevated wildlife corridor being constructed in the Dehradun Valley region. Next slide, please. So I'll be covering the implementation part of the safeguards. Next slide. We are today going to discuss about the project which has been successfully implemented. It's a 12-kilometer long elevated wildlife corridor, and after construction, it will be one of the longest wildlife elevated corridors in Asia. Next slide, please. So the project is actually located in the state of Uttarakhand, which is a basically Himalayan state. It's in the northern part of India. Uttarakhand shares its boundary on the northern side with China and on the eastern side with Nepal. Next slide. What was the need for development? As we are progressing ahead, it was decided by Government of India to connect national capital of India, that is New Delhi, with state capital, that is Dehradun. And there was a requirement of high-speed corridor looking at the increased traffic over the years. So it was decided by Government of India to construct a new expressway. It is around 210 kilometers long. Next slide, please. So 210 kilometers long. So I'll be covering basically the last 20-kilometer part of the stretch of 210 kilometers, which is actually passing through a dense forest. So starting with the ground scenario a few years back, when we started this project, you can see this is the existing highway. You can see the dense forest both sides of the existing highway. The highway was constructed at grade, means at the ground level. So there was a number of human-wildlife conflicts were reported throughout the year. The stretch was very narrow, and due to its narrowness and deficient geometrics, it was not able to handle the traffic capacity and the traffic load. As a result, there was unsafe conditions being developed, like in the form of accidents over the highways. Next slide, please. So when 5 years back, it was decided to upgrade this national highway to a high-speed corridor. The DPR studies were started long back in 2019. And during 2019 and 20, the detailed project report was prepared. All the technical parameters were finalized during this period. And since this last 20 kilometers was quite rich in flora and fauna and wildlife movements, so Wildlife Institute of India was contacted for conducting a study on behalf of National Highways Authority of India. Since the project was crossing through forest areas, so forest and wildlife proposals were submitted for clearance to different authorities, like Mr. Yadav covered that there are National Board of Wildlife and different forest authorities who are empowered to clear such kind of clearances, give such kind of clearances. And finally, after obtaining all the clearances, the implementation of project was started on 7th of October 2021. And as on date, the project is almost completed, and we are about to open this project to general public in the month of July 2024. The background, how we planned the last 20 kilometers, like where the elevated corridor should be constructed and where is the actual requirement, where it should be at the ground, where it should be elevated. So on the request of National Highways Authority of India, Wildlife Institute of India conducted a study by installing 81 number of trap cameras in the month of April to July 2020. And it was the period when world was facing the COVID pandemic. During that period, the traffic on highway was very less and movement of wildlife was very high. So after doing this study, they came up with the data, and the data shows something like this. Next slide, please. For the purpose of study, they divided this 20-kilometer stretch in 3 zones: Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3. Zone 1 is relatively a plain area, And zone 2 is relatively a hilly terrain, and zone 3 is a kind of rolling terrain, but having very dense tree density. So this zonation was done based on the past experiences of presence of wildlife with WII and the topographical conditions. When the data of the procured data from trap cameras were analyzed, so this is the density diagram of wildlife crossing. So you can see that the number of wildlife crossings in zone 1, that is a relatively plain area, it's convenient and easy to be used by wildlife. So the number of crossings is very high in this stretch, and it is throughout the length. Almost full length is being used in crossing by different species of the wildlife. In the second zone, that is middle one, it is also being predominantly throughout the length, but there are certain segments which are being used. And in zone 3, there were some particular locations, like 2 locations were observed, which was used predominantly by wildlife for crossing of the highway. Next. So this is the report, the kind of species which were using the highway for crossing. And you can see that leopards and Asian elephants were also found predominantly crossing the highway. Next. These are the locations of leopards crossing the highway. It is based on the trap camera. It has been shown. Next. So after the detailed study and analysis of the data, finally, Wildlife Institute of India came up with the recommendation that for the zone 1, the total length of zone 1 is 4.90 kilometer, and out of that 4.90 kilometer, Wildlife Institute of India recommended 3.50 kilometer to be an elevated corridor. Similarly, for zone 2, it is 6.80 kilometers should be elevated against the total length of 13.30 kilometer. And for zone 3, they recommended 400 meter elevated corridor in the total length of 1.80 kilometer. After receiving the report to elevate the highway, because initially it was planned to widen the existing road at ground. But after receiving the report, which was saying to elevate the corridor in a length of around 10.7 kilometers, it was a very costly affair to National Highways Authority of India, because there is a big difference between going for a conventional widening and going for an elevated corridor. Like if you see the difference in cost, the conventional widening is costing us around $3.52 million per kilometer, whereas elevating the same highway, it is costing us around $12 million per kilometer. So for a length of 10.7 kilometers, we had to expend around $94 million additional. But the same, after receiving the report, it was analyzed in-house and it was submitted to Government of India and to the Empowered Committee in Government of India. And Empowered Committee was generous enough to accept the recommendations, looking at the environmental and ecological benefits. And finally, the required fund was sanctioned by Government of India. And after go-ahead signal from Government of India, the project was redesigned by National Highways Authority of India. Next slide, please. And we came up looking at the site requirements, topographical requirements. So finally, we came up with a higher, longer length of elevated corridor. Like in zone 1, it was recommended to construct 3.50 kilometer length, whereas National Highway Authority of India finally incorporated 4.40 kilometer length in zone 1. Similarly, in zone 2, it was 7.60 kilometer against the 6.80 kilometer recommended length. And in zone 3, it was recommended to construct 400 meter long elevated corridor based on the topography and other engineering requirements. Finally, it was constructed 1.80 kilometer. So in totality, 13.80 kilometer elevated highway has been constructed against the recommended 10.70 kilometer length by Wildlife Institute of India. Next, please. Some additional features were also incorporated in the project, like 6 number of animal underpasses, and some cross drainage structures in the form of major bridges, minor bridges, box culverts, pipe culverts. These are also sufficient in number and equidistant kind of coming intermittently between the project. So these structures can also be used by wildlife for crossing of the highway. And we incorporated a tunnel also of a length of 370 meter length. So it is also helping. There is a ridge line over this tunnel. It is also helping to cross the wildlife from one side to another side. So this was the finalized development plan. Total length was 20 kilometers, but 12 kilometers is the elevated corridor length. 370 meter is the length of the tunnel, and 2 elephant underpasses of 200 meter each. In addition to that, 6 number of animal passes were also constructed. So this is the plan of the development. If you see the yellow one is the existing national highway, basically passing through forest areas. And the red one is the proposed or finalized elevated alignment, which has been kept in such a way that it is coming near to the bank where trees are mostly not there. In order to minimize the number of felling of the trees, it has been planned in such a way. But looking at the topography and geometric requirement of the this terrain, some trees were needed to be felled down, and it was done. Next slide. Next slide. So we'll have some photographs of the project under construction. These are around 7-8 months back photograph taken earlier. This is photograph of zone 1. You can see the terrain is quite plain. So it is frequently being used by wildlife to cross. Most of the crossings have been observed in this area. So we are elevating this zone 100% in full length. Next. This is after construction of elevated corridor. You can see the existing road is also visible. And on the left side of the river, this is the Rajaji National Park. On the right side of the river, it is Sivalik Reserve Forest Area. So once the project is completed, the existing highway will be handed over to Forest Department. They may use for the purpose of inspection. Highway authorities may also sometimes use this highway for inspection of elevated corridor from below, but otherwise it will not be used by general public. Next. This is also a zone 1 photograph taken from another angle. Next. This is an image of zone 2. Zone 2 is a relatively hilly terrain, and the river passing through this area is quite narrow. Next. This is a spiral look of the elevated corridor. A number of curves were inserted in this during the design of the highway, looking at the requirement of geometrics. Next. The same this spiral look of the highway at different location. Next. This is the 370 meter long tunnel constructed at the border of 2 states. There is a ridge line over the tunnel. It is also being used by wildlife to cross from one side to another side. Next. This is image of zone 3. You can see the density of the trees in this area. They are basically sal trees, and you can see the piers coming up for construction of elephant underpasses. Next. These are the foundation and pier for the elephant underpasses under construction a year ago back. Next. This is the elephant underpass. There are 2 well-identified elephant corridors in this zone 3. So both the places 200 meter long, each elephant underpass is being constructed. Even during construction, we observed the crossing of elephant herds from these underpasses. This project is conceived in such a way that the road below, the existing road, will be kind of abolished, and we have planned the elevated corridor over the existing road itself. Once constructed, the road below will not be used by for movement of any traffic, and it will be closed forever. Only the elevated part will be used by any movement of vehicle. So it was a challenging project. There was a target for 2 years, and we have almost completed the project. We faced some challenges during implementation, like restricted working hours were imposed by wildlife authorities. So we abide by that, and the work was carried during sunrise to sunset only. And since the project is constructed along the river, somewhere it is crossing the river, somewhere it is on the bank of the river. So we faced flash flood because it's a seasonal river. So we faced flash flood situation every monsoon. The project was affected for 2 to 3 months in every year monsoon season. And while doing the foundation work, there were a number of pits were to be dug, and safety of wildlife was also a concern. So all the pits were barricaded, foundation pits were barricaded, so that during night time while crossing, no wildlife should fall down in these foundation pits. And I'm happy to share that during entire execution of the work, no wildlife animal has been reported to have any harm or any fatality is reported. Another challenge was there was no telecommunication network in the project area. So this was making us a difficult task in case of any rescue requirement in the project zone. Other than that, what I have covered, we are going to install noise and sound barriers so that there will be the noise of vehicles will not be going inside the forest areas. With the help of Wildlife Institute of India, we are going to install cameras on almost on every pillar. The number of pillars in this project is around 576 number of pillars, and all the pillars will have a camera to monitor the wildlife crossing, so that further studies, by this help of these studies, it will be quite helpful in designing our upcoming projects, whether we really need such a long elevated corridors, or we can optimize the number of length of the corridor. So we are expecting that this will be helpful in designing future projects. In addition to that, National Highway Authority of India provided fund to forest departments to restore the nearby areas in 116 hectare in the form of making recharge holes, check dams, plantation, rescue arrangements, ambulances for wildlife, etc. So we paid around $4.80 million to nearby forest departments. This is one of the photographs taken from another project implemented in India. So just for reference, that after installation of noise and light barrier, it will look like that. Next. And Mr. Yadav covered this photograph. This is basically, I was talking about the installation of cameras. So it will be helpful in further studies about the efficacy of such elevated corridors. Next. I'm thankful, and with I'll close my presentation with a remark that nowadays in all the infrastructure in India is being conceived with due sensitivity to wildlife, and our counterparts in the forest department, wildlife, they have a stringent norms. Only after crossing and qualifying those norms and getting clearances from these agencies, we are in a condition to start any project. So we are very sensitive, and all the projects are being designed in such a way that there should be a sustainable development for the ecology as well as development. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that detailed vision of how this is working on the ground. But I have to say, it's not a common vision. This is one of the most extraordinary projects in the world. And I had the great pleasure and honor to go visit when the rebar was still sticking out of many of those pylons in the middle of the river. And we were just stunned by the magnitude of it and how the placement of it in a river is avoiding cutting more forest, and how you showed in that first image what a hard edge, we call hard edge park, we're dealing with, that right outside is a very dense population that's growing, and the needs for connectivity for humans is very high. So you're finding that terrific balance of enabling the connectivity of the wildlife in these critical areas for wildlife's future, while connecting people, which is essential. So this is a great project, and I'm very happy to see all the drone shots because we couldn't get that impression while we were on the ground on the highway. So that was super exciting. I also think it's amazing how fast it went. A lot of times people find infrastructure projects and permitting and everything take such a long time. But the fact that you got the data you needed and the permits that you needed and all the work getting going within 5 years is super impressive. And of course, the budget being approved by the government is absolutely an inspiration. So thank you so much for that vision of how this can work on the ground. It's super helpful for all of us. So now I'd like to open it up for questions. I've gotten a few already. I'll start with Dr. Yadav. How do you identify the sites where the wildlife corridors and crossings should be constructed? We got some good examples in this last presentation, but in general, and let's say for tigers, how has that worked across India? And how can others gain inspiration and ideas from the way that you handle that?
It is important to understand how the corridors are identified. So we do All India Tiger Estimation once in 4 years. This is the cycle. All India Tiger Estimation is done. And during 2014 All India Tiger Estimation, with the help of Wildlife Institute of India and National Tiger Conservation Authority, they identified all the corridors. There are 32 major corridors across all tiger landscape in the country, and they have been identified on the basis of scientific analysis, and they have been identified at macro level, and a separate booklet has been published. It's as a part of All India Tiger Estimation Report. And these corridors, they get surrogate legal protection under the Wildlife Protection Act, under the Wildlife Protection Act of Government of India. Any unsustainable use of these corridors cannot be done. As Mr. Maurya was saying, that there are stringent provisions under the law, and no one can take a project in these areas unless approved by the competent authority. So this is how the corridors are identified and notified. And these corridors are also included in the statutory tiger conservation plan. And this is how they get protection under the law. Now the question is how the question was, how do you identify the sites where the wildlife corridors crossing should be constructed? So these corridors are notified, they are known to the local officers, they are known to the Wildlife Institute of India. The National Tiger Conservation Authority has also put a DSS system on its website, that decision support system. Anybody can log in and they put their longitude, latitude, the GPS readings, and they can understand, they can know whether their project is falling within the corridor or not. If yes, and then they have to go for the mitigation measures. These crossings are constructed based on scientific analysis. As Mr. Maurya was indicating, there are the camera traps are utilized by the frontline forest department, the wildlife department, and they know, they have the prior knowledge that which part of the corridor is frequently used for the movement of not only tiger, leopards, elephants, and all other wildlife in that area. So these sites are identified completely on the scientific basis. Thank you.
Great. I have a personal question I've been dying to ask for a year of Mr. Maurya. That terrific choice of not cutting down forests and using the floodplain, what happens during the monsoons? That's just the tiny question I want to know. How is it the repetition of the supports that will provide the safety measures? And I just wonder, because that's a very innovative idea, but if there must be an engineering challenge there when the monsoons come.
Yeah, of course. See, the work has a particular time duration to complete, and there was a condition imposed, post-tender condition was imposed not to work during night time. So the duration of the work was quite limited, and it's a kind of the project where we were working. It's a seasonal river, So during rainy season, the catchment area is very big and flash floods were coming intermittently. So when some work is going on, lots of machinery, workforce is there, and out of sudden, if you notice that flash flood is coming, you won't have time to remove those machineries. During last year, we lost some of the machineries, and even it damaged our reinforcement under installation. So we faced some losses also during these monsoon seasons. So it was kind of interruption to the project.
But
Anyhow,
but the structure itself will be able to support traffic during monsoons when there is flooding in the area, right? We won't have to close it.
yes, everything was because the traffic is not plying on this. This is a greenfield alignment. It's a new alignment.
Yeah.
Being constructed nearby the existing road. So the traffic was plying on the existing road, and the things were safe, and the structure is also safe. No issues to that.
That's exciting because it does allow for the avoidance that we talked about earlier of cutting down trees and widening, that the widening idea would have caused. So that's very exciting. Thank you for that input. So back to some detailed questions about how this works. Under or overpasses are most effective, but did you consider road level crossings protected by animal detection systems at locations where this is not possible or affordable? I know that you're looking at that with trains in India, but I wonder if you could expand on animal detection systems.
Yeah, Kit, in fact, as you have seen, the corridors are very long, and on certain pockets, only the underpasses or overpasses have been prescribed. Other areas, they are covered on both sides by the forest. So you can say that these are the level crossing areas. For this, the mitigation measures which are adopted are speed breakers, speed limits, and speed breakers are constructed every 500 meters or so. And then there are signages warning to the drivers that slow down, hey, slow down, that this is the area where animals are using for crossing. So these two measures are adopted on the roads. And then for railway system, we have developed, we have kind of successfully demonstrated that seismic sensor system, which are employed, and whenever the animals come closer to the railway tracks, and they give automatic signals and to the control room, and the control room alerts the driver, and driver slows down or stops the train. Something like this technological help we are taking to tackle this kind of problem.
That's very exciting. We want to be able to use technology to address some of these great challenges. We've had really cool and interesting questions, but I think we're out of time now, unfortunately. And I'm going to hand this over to Tremi. I just want to say one last thank you to the United States Agency for International Development, who has had a long history of supporting conservation in the region, and particularly conservation of large cats. And we want to applaud both of you for this extraordinary work you're doing in India that we have been learning from for years and years and getting inspiration from. And now with the global initiative on big cats, you will be continuing to inspire the world. So thank you so much again. And Tremi, I'll hand it back to you for an on-time completion.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you, Mary Melnick. Thank you, Mr. S.P. Yadav and Mr. Pankaj Murya. It's been such an honor to have you all here today, and thanks to the audience for your wonderful questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but I think we had we learned a lot today, and I was with Kate when we did that visit to Dehradun, and just as she said, we looked out the window, we said, oh my gosh, there it is. It was just so exciting. It was like meeting a friend you didn't know existed for the first time, or seeing a tiger. So thank you very much for that exciting experience for us. And I would just like to provide you in the chat, we're going to share the link for our previous webinar that I mentioned on linear infrastructure and snow leopards. And then, because we had so much to say, at this time, we're having a second webinar next week at the same time, next week on Thursday to look at more examples from India and also research surrounding how linear infrastructure impacts tigers and other cats in the region. So you can see our speakers there, Dr. Bilal Habib, Dr. Neil Carter, Dr. Mary Melnick will be with us again, and the session will be moderated by Kate Vanelli. So thanks once again for joining us. If you have any questions, please reach out to those of us who organized this event today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Let me just see, I'm getting one more question here. So thank you very much on behalf of the Align project. There you can see our website. Once again, this is our USAID funded project, Asia's Linear Infrastructure Safeguarding Nature. And here we are working in India, Nepal, and Mongolia, and in the region in general. So thanks very much for your presence today, and look forward to connecting with you again soon.